Hey people, welcome to Storytime with Saneatra. In this video, I will be reading a story from my book, Where Is Your Mind? It's a collection of short stories. The story that I'm reading from this book is called The Story of Chancey Lawrence. Chancey Lawrence is a doctor and she will be hiring an intern to come help her out with some research. But as with all stories, there's always a plot twist. So we're going to find out what that plot twist is. I'm going to read this story in two parts. So this video is part 1 and it begins. Letitia drove nonstop for 5 hours outside of the city to a rural town in southern Illinois. She was going to start an internship with Dr. Chancey Lawrence, infamous relationship expert and popular Chicago socialite. Dr. Chancey Lawrence hit every major television network with her research on women and men relations and was set to have her own talk show before she seemingly dropped off the face of the earth. Nevertheless, Letitia was psyched when she was invited by the doctor to work on her latest research project. Letitia exited the freeway when she was told to do so by her navigation system and then drove for 2 miles into a foggy haze until she saw a sign leading her to the doctor's property. It was a huge brick mansion tucked behind tall oak trees. Letitia parked her car and walked up the steps to the door. She rang the bell and seconds later, a rather plain but still beautiful woman opened the door. It was Dr. Chancey Lawrence in a pair of jeans, polo shirt, and canvas sneakers. Letitia expected to see the doctor in business attire. After all, Letitia was wearing the infamous black suit that all students purchase when they get to their senior year in college. Letitia supposed the doctor was happy to see her. Her greeting was quite melancholy. She led Letitia into the kitchen. The place was clean, but the decor had been from the 80s. Chancey smiled at Letitia. "You can relax," she said as she looked Letitia up and down. Unbutton a couple of buttons. Take your jacket off. The atmosphere is rather calm." Letitia took a much-needed exhale as she took off her jacket and rested it on the back of a kitchen chair. Chancey offered her a cup of coffee. The two sat at the table quietly sipping their coffee. Letitia had already gotten the job, but she knew Dr. Lawrence was sizing her up, analyzing her without so much of a word being spoken. Letitia wondered if the way she picked up her coffee cup and sipped it said anything negative about her. As time went on, she felt awkward and had to break the silence. "So, Dr. Lawrence, what exactly will I be working on here?" Chancey thought for a moment as if she had no work for Letitia. "Well, I guess we could start with the files I have down in the basement." She got up from the table. "Come, let me show you." She led Letitia down a long hall to the basement door. Judging from the rest of the house, the basement was everything Letitia imagined it would be. It was dark, only a tiny bulb hanging from the ceiling giving light to anything directly below it, which was a desk and a chair and nothing else. Before I look into the files, I would like you to put them in alphabetical order." Letitia looked at the small desk, cardboard box with papers in it. She estimated the job will take no more than 2 hours. Chancey looked around the basement as if to find more work for her intern. She couldn't find any. "Just take your time, get your things, and I'll show you to your room." Chancey showed Letitia to her room. She let her have the biggest room in the house, but the young intern was a bit frazzled when she found there was no cell phone signal, no internet service, or television in the house. The library is 2 walls down, and any of the books will be useful to you in your research. Letitia pouted and flopped down on the bed. "I guess." Chancey felt the young woman's dismay. "I'll see what I can do to make this place seem like less of a prison. On a sunny day, it's beautiful and bright here. Sometimes I sit out back in the garden and get lost in my thoughts for hours and hours." Chancey walked around the room. Letitia looked at her cell phone, searching for a signal. She wondered, how would she know if her boyfriend is trying to contact her? Days had passed and Chancey saw it was taking Letitia time to get used to the secluded place. Chancey thought Letitia reminded her of her own younger sister, Sam. Sam was always doing something to stay busy. Chancey knew Sam's restlessness was to ignore the voices in her head. Chancey remembered when the two of them, 9 and 10, baked 10 apple pies, cut each into 4 huge slices, and planned to sell them for $1 apiece. The two set up a table down the driveway. Chancey thought no one would buy the slices of pie because no one hardly ever passed their house. Nevertheless, waiting for a customer was enough to keep Sam busy. At the end of the day, some of the pies were put in the freezer and some were served after dinner. Chancey also remembered the games her sister invented that kept the two running in and out of the house and out into the field until the sun set. When things got crazy in the house, when either her brother or uncle was raising a fuss, the girls found solace amongst the tall sunflowers that grew in the field. Sam would ask, Do you think they, referring to her brother and uncle, hear voices for real? Chancey would shrug. I don't know, it sounds crazy. I don't think it's crazy because I hear them too. Chancey looked at her sister strange as she continued to reveal that she too was suffering from a mental illness. I can't ignore them like I used to when it seems as if they are louder and louder. One night I snuck into Mama's liquor cabinet. I grabbed a bottle of gin and I drank it. I felt good and the voices were quiet. You got drunk? Sam grinned. Yes, and it felt really good, but don't tell Mama on me. Chancey promised to keep the secret. That was the most normal conversation she had with her sister, and even though she saw her sister every day, she missed her. Her sister dropped out of school and became known around the area as a town crazy drunk whore. The only way to control her was to give her medicine that made her feel like a zombie. She sat wherever she was placed and just stared into space. Chancey recalled how on any given day she walked past, she'd be walking through the hall of her house, and in each room, someone in her family was experiencing some type of psychotic episode. Chancey thought her mother was the perfect example of patience. No formal training on dealing with mental illness, she took care of her son, daughter, and brother the only way she knew how, with love. Chancey made the decision to study psychology so she could study how to help her family and those like her. She attended a university in Chicago. She basically got away from her family and barely looked back. She didn't return home for spring, a summer break, or during the holidays. Instead, she made sure she was at every party, at every social event. She started work at school newspaper, interned for a magazine, and got her first job. She used the money from that job to support her graduate education and alcohol addiction. She doesn't know how she made it through. Some mornings her breakfast consisted of vodka and cornflakes. She partied and remembered enough to write about it in her blogs. She became a famous face on the Chicago social scene, a self-proclaimed expert on how to live as a single, intelligent, sexual, confident woman in the city. In her 20s, she was a functional alcoholic with a PhD. She wrote her first book and it became a New York Times bestseller. She had an agent who informed her the drinking had to stop. He said she was reaching the pinnacle of her career and if she wanted to remain successful, she had to stop the drinking. All the while, her mom would call her and ask her to come home to visit the family. She may have been a success to many, but she was a failure to her family. Her intent to help them had faded and she couldn't face them. Nevertheless, she lied to her mother and told her she'd return as soon as she'd get a break from work. The things in Chancey's life would soon get out of control once she started to hear one single voice urging her to return home. Okay, so I'm going to stop it right here. That's part one. And get a little background on Chancey Lawrence's life. So she went into the field of psychology to help her family, but that's not what happened. She kind of just got wrapped up in living her own life. But she too hears voices and she's hearing something that's telling her to return home. So in part 2, we're going to find out whether or not she go home, and if she goes home, what's happening there. And also about Letitia, how is her internship going with the Dr. Chancey Lawrence. So thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for part 2. Bye.